Call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
Excused. I haven't heard from him, but he was planning on being here, so we'll just go with that.
Eric?
Here.
Kurt?
Excused.
Jay?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Cindy?
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. 2 assembly members are missing today. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item on the agenda this evening is approval of minutes, and we need a motion for approval of the minutes from the February 1st, 2016 regular meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Jay, seconded by Nancy to approve the minutes of February 1st. Any changes, or seeing no hands come up, we'll consider those accepted. Is there any amendments, or do we have a motion for approval of tonight's meeting agenda?
So moved. So moved.
Okay, moved by Cindy, seconded by Eric to approve the meeting agenda for this evening. So seeing no changes, we'll move forward as presented. There's nothing under public hearings, no bid awards. Is there any visitors' views related to items on tonight's agenda in the audience? Come to the microphone, state your name and who you represent, please.
Thank you. My name is David Beebe. I'm representing the city of Kupreanof, and I'd like to thank the Borough Assembly for the honor of being part of the meeting with Mr. Michael Lukshin as it related to the transfer of ownership to the Kupreanof dock. And just would like to also thank the borough for the use of the harbor skiff in a difficult and sort of challenging situation, and it definitely provided an important sort of means of rescue, I guess, and with a boat about to collide with the dock. I'd also like to make sure that to be clear that the city of Kupreanof is looking forward to the possibility of perhaps entering into a memorandum of understanding with the borough and the state as it relates to figuring out how to fund the repairs to the dock and the deferred maintenance that is badly in need of being caught up with. I'd also like to commend the Planning and Zoning Commission for entering into comments for the draft environmental impact statement for the Tongass Land Resource Management Plan, and I have to commend them on their approach to making sure that everyone understands the importance of maintaining a viable opportunity for local small mills to have access to the timber that they need. I think it's a very positive aspect of a local representation of the timber industry that can be very important to sort of diversifying the local economy, as well as understanding the absolute importance of making sure that the old growth habitat of our island returns to its former state, and that would require a definite revisioning of the way the Tongass has been used in the past, and hopefully we can restore what was once, pretty much regionally recognized trophy deer hunting habitat. I'd also, if I may slip in, a little plug for the city of Krupernoff's 40th anniversary, which will be occurring during the Mayfest celebrations on May 14th. The city of Krupernoff will be providing transportation to and from our dock, and there's games and prizes and lots of fun activities that will be available, along with scheduled hikes to both the creek. There's been quite a few upgrades to the city trail system, and of course Petersburg Mountain. So keep our fingers crossed for the weather on that. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss the ownership of the dock.
Okay. Any questions of Dave? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Dave. For the record, Assemblymember Lynn is with us tonight, so we have 6 out of the 7. Next, any other visitors with views related to tonight's agenda? Mike, please step forward, state your name and who you represent.
My name is Mike Bangs. I'm representing myself, and it's in regards to the issue of taking over the 3 facilities that the state is offering. I would encourage the Assembly to wait on this, not take any action until we have there's a lot of unanswered questions, and they aren't offering nearly enough money to fix the docks, and let alone maintain them in the future. It'd be really hard to figure out a way to fund maintenance and operation of them. So I would like to run this by the Harbor Board, get their feelings, and just wait on this until we get more questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any other visitors in the audience tonight with views related to items on the agenda?
I'm here representing planning and zoning. If you want me to talk when you're talking about those things, or
Yeah, it might be fresher in our mind. And if you want to stay, or you can do it right now. Dave,
no, it's fine. I can
Okay.
stay.
Why don't you just do it now?
Okay.
Could you just? Oh, you got a list. Good.
Yeah. Basically, it's dealing with the comprehensive plan, which is on your agenda tonight for approval. And I know in your packet you had a list of amendments that we had proposed for that plan. And they're pretty straightforward. I guess the only thing I'd remind the Assembly is that the planning document, or the comprehensive plan, is precisely that. It's nothing written in stone. You guys approve this document, it's a blueprint. Any element in it that you don't like in a couple of years, or that the public doesn't like in a couple of years, can be changed through the ordinance process. It's nothing, it's basically just an outline. Give us some direction of where we want to go. So if there's something in here that somebody has real particular heartburn over, and I'm sure there's something in here that everybody could pick out that they have heartburn over, and that I just want to remind the community at large that everything in here is subject to change and revision by this body and by the voters if they so choose. Most of the amendments are pretty minor. It was a good process. It included a lot of public process. A lot of people participated in it. The consultants got a lot of input from it. And the other thing which might need some further explanation is and it's rather timely, it's the letter dealing with the TLUMP process. I wish our chair was here tonight because he's a little bit more versed on these issues than I am. But to sum it up, basically what we're recommending is that the approach to at least the borough be, instead of harvesting the timber, right when it reaches the exact point of maturity, which is 65 to 75 years, that it'd be allowed to grow a little bit longer. The point being, there's a lot of small mills in town, and the type of lump timber that will be available under this proposed plan won't be mature enough for them to do anything with that they could really make any money on. And that was the main concern that they had on that. And then also another really interesting thing stuck, I don't even know if it was a typo on the part of the Forest Service on the plan, but number 3 on one of the pages was an export of rural energy resources without benefit to Southeast Alaska communities. Didn't make much sense to me. I mean, why would you have a timber plan or essentially a land use plan for the forest and then put in it that you can export renewable energy resources without benefit of Southeast Alaska communities? I think they need to take a look at that. I think the priority for any resources coming out of the Tonga should obviously be to the benefit of the local communities that live here. Maybe that was just a misprint on their part, but I think that needs to be addressed. And then the other change was a question in the plan where it said cooperate with other agencies in developing 35 miles of transportation corridors during the 15 years after plan approval. But nowhere did it really define, where do they come up with 35 miles and exactly which roads they're talking about. The only one I can figure out is probably the Cape Petersburg Road. So those are some of the changes and additions. And if you guys got any questions later about that letter, I'd be happy to answer them then or now.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Any questions of Dave? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other visitors with views related to items on tonight's agenda? Now is the time to speak to those. Okay, seeing none. Move to the next item on the agenda, and that's visitors' views unrelated to items on today's agenda. Is there any visitors that have views unrelated to the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward. There's no board, commission, and committee reports tonight. Nothing on the consent agenda. No report of other officers besides the mayor and the manager, and that brings us to the mayor's report. So I will go through that. I've added a couple things that weren't listed on the agenda, but they're not action items. So anyway, we're seeking letters of interest. The borough is seeking letters of interest from borough residents willing to serve on the following boards, commissions until October of 2016. There's still 2 seats on the hospital board and 1 on the planning commission. So if you're interested, you could email the city or the borough rather, or mail them to box 329, or just bring them into the borough clerk. We'll give a little report on the trip to the Alaska Municipal League. Vice Mayor Lagadakis, Assembly Member Lynn, and myself attended the AML Winter Legislative Conference in Juneau last week. It was kind of interesting. I'll go through the other items and we'll pop back to that one. Meeting with the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. While in Juneau, we met with Assembly Member Lynn, Council Member from Kupernoff, Dave Beebe, our lobbyist Ray Matuszowski, and Assembly Member Lagadakis and myself met with Mike Lukshin from the state, and they offered us the transfer of the 3 facilities within our borough, and we'll discuss that later. It's on the agenda. So, and we met with Senator Stedman and Representative Christ Tompkins, the DNR, and some people from the ferry system. So it was an interesting trip. A couple of, see if I could find my notes here. Thought I added a few things. One thing I'd like to ask of the land selection committee, it sounds like they're pretty close to coming up with the land selection for the 1,300 acres or almost 1,400 acres that we're supposed to get during the borough transformation. I'd like to see if they could have that presented to the borough at the next meeting, which is March 7th, so we could address it, and maybe we could talk to DNR again when we're in Juneau on the 15th of next month. Sounds like we're going to have to, if we want more land than the original offer, we're going to have to do that in a supplemental ask, and it'll be a legislative, have to go before the legislature. So it doesn't sound like it's undoable, but that'll be another thing the Land Selections Committee will be tasked with, is to pick up to the 9,000 acres or however many we want to throw out there of the 18,000 VUU lands that are in our borough. So with that being said, since we're on that topic, Assemblymember Lynn has expressed interest in working with the Land Selections Committee kind of as a liaison to the Assembly. So without any objection, I'd like to, of the Assembly, I'd like to appoint Bob. Are you still interested, Bob?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So at this point, maybe I'll just keep rattling on here. I'll give my perspective of the AML meetings. I think we really need to keep a close eye on funding mechanisms that the state uses to supply money to the municipalities. They're talking about reducing the revenue sharing, upping the municipalities' share of the PERS liability. For every 1% that goes up now, currently it's 22% by the municipalities and 78% by the state. For every percent that goes up for the borough of Petersburg, that would mean $50,000 to $60,000 roughly, if I'm correct on that, Steve. So it's something we need to keep an eye on. They're also on their little spreadsheet of things they're looking at tapping into is into the raw fish tax, or is it used to be 80-20, the state would get 80, the municipalities 20, and then now it's at 50-50. That's where it's sitting right now, but they're talking about popping more of that back to the state, so that could really have an effect on us as well. Another meeting that I sat in with, and Cindy was going to be there, but she had to leave early, was with Mike Pulowski, I think is how you pronounce it, who's the head chief of staff for Senator Lisa Murkowski. And the discussion there was about the trans-boundary rivers. There was a lot of other interest groups in the room and people on the phone. I think it was pretty well received, our approach, and I know they're getting a little pushback from industry, supporting this International Joint Commission to convene and come up with an opinion from other, industries, mining groups or whoever, and they think it's going to be, trying to shut the industry down, and everybody in the room said that isn't the case. We just want to make sure we get baseline river water quality studies done of the rivers, and everybody agreed to that, and it's already taking place, but at a pretty small level. So maybe we ask for more funding for that, so it could be a more involved analysis of the condition of the water as it is now, so we have some baseline to go to. And anyway, with Cindy, do you have anything to add? I'm sure we're all taking pages of notes, but what kind of stuck out in your mind that you wanted to talk about?
A lot of discussion back and forth on ferry and the importance to southeast communities. However, when the commissioner spoke to Municipal League, I still felt like he didn't quite understand what was being said in terms of how folks felt that was an important economic generator. And AML will be sending out a letter, if they have not yet, the Sustainability Committee that I was on. And there were several points that they wanted communities and individuals to write letters to the editor and ask for a sustainable and predictable budget and a cap on the dividend, and to maintain a flow of capital projects, because they're definitely economic engines for the state, and right now there's not much in the way of capital projects being proposed statewide, so that will affect contractors and communities and all kinds of things. And then when we were in the Municipal League meeting, we heard a lot of different permutations about how to address the budget situation. The take-home message is that it is serious. We do need to pay attention, and I would encourage people to contact their legislators with their ideas for what works and what isn't palatable, so that they know what we're thinking.
So, is that it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Bob, did you want to have something you wanted to add from
Yeah.
your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, I guess I came away with a number of things. One of them is that there's probably 3 bills that are sitting before the legislature right now. They're aimed at fixing the entire problem over the state. All of them, I think, essentially get into the permanent fund in one way or another. And I would encourage everybody to take a look at those things that are being looked at right now. The other part of that is that essentially all the fees and a lot of the things now that the state is paying they're looking at shifting to the municipalities. And if that happens, then obviously then our costs go up significantly. And I mean, we're across the board. So Mark talked about the fisheries. They're also looking at maybe even increasing the fish tax. They were looking at all kinds of increases. They were reducing revenue sharing, just essentially just across the board. And so I'm same place kind of Cindy is. We got to have something sustainable, whatever that might be. It's like a yo-yo now, and it's really hard to plan for what we want to do in the future. And I don't think there was any trying to get a feel for what might happen. I don't even think I walked away with that not everybody's on the same page, so to speak. There's a lot of discussion and maybe concussion. I don't know what you would call it, but up there. But please, we need to pay attention to it very closely. The last one I would say is that I came away with I didn't realize the effect that the change from a AAA bond rating in the state of Alaska to a AA bond rating, to me it was a kind of Mox Nix, didn't really mean anything. I did not realize the impact, the funding impact that has. It's over $40 million a year just from reducing the bond rating because of increases in interest rates, et cetera. And every time the state goes for a bond, the interest rates go up. And so the governor is sending a delegation back to see what we can do to bring that back up again. And with that, I'll stop.
Right, and it's just listening to Bob and Cindy give their perspective on the time up there. They're talking about raising alcohol tax, tobacco tax, and like Bob said, another 1% on the fish landing tax. 100% of that stays in the general fund, and it's and capping the permanent fund at $1,000. And if they do that, it actually look like it might help reduce the budget. I think it was Senate Bill 144 is the one that Senator McGuire proposed, and she gave a pretty lengthy presentation. And so you can just get online and go through that one. So anyway, with that being said, if there's no questions of us from the rest of the assembly, we'll move to the manager's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We had some warranty work done on Scow Bay number 1 generator. Started last week and continued through the weekend. Should have it back online this week. Our mechanic, Bob Zemke, is working with the 3 MTU mechanics to perform this work. So the hope is he also learns a little bit more about that generator so we can keep it up and running when necessary. It's in my report is we've mobilized to take down the Mitkoff Sales Building. Carl's group's a little more efficient than I wrote. Pretty much it's down and maybe a day or 2 left to finish up. Just as a reminder, we were going to have to do that regardless. DEC wanted that building removed and things capped, and plus the advantage of giving us some extra parking places. So we'll get that squared away when CCON's here this summer. We should be able to get some paving done in the areas that need it in that area, but we'll end up with some extra parking out of the deal. Carl's group are working in the quarry to free up some shot rock from our embankment up there for spring and summer projects, so folks see and hear that. I want to say thank you to Chris Morrison for his donation of rotary composter parts and equipment, as well as his insight on converting those concrete mixers to composters. Staff has been very appreciative of his help, giving us hints on how to use it better and be more efficient and making the process work better. I'm not sure this is good or bad news, but our water staff was actually able to drive all the way up to Cabin Creek Reservoir to inspect the dam. This is generally not possible this time of year. There's usually 3 or 4 feet of snow on the reservoir road. So but we were up there and able to get that to it last week. So hopefully there's enough snow for streams. We've got proposals that are due for the replacement of the baler conveyor structure. It's due on March 1st. It was recently discovered that Department of Labor is considering this to be a construction project, not a maintenance project. This possibly will add cost to the project by requiring the use of the prevailing wages and DOL filing fees. It also requires the borough to utilize the state Alaskan preference statute, which may reduce the number of bidders. So we really won't know if this will get us out of the money, and we'd have to start over again or not, but we'll keep the assembly informed. Horion Associates is working on the permitting and design of an open-top container loading bulkhead at the Baylor facility. Trying to get this permitted with the Corps by way of the nationwide permit for government facility expansions, hoping that that'll work and gives us a little faster project time. If not, we'll have to go through the normal Corps of Engineers permit process. Motor pool staff has started assembly of the flatbed and transfer of the crane from the old power plant mechanic truck to the new cab and chassis. It's kind of slowed it down a bit because the old crane mount was going to take a huge amount of labor to get it off of there, and so to reduce the overall costs, we got a new crane pedestal was ordered, and once that gets here, it'll get loaded on the new truck, and then the crane attached. The old crane moved from the old truck to the new one. Our first new patrol SUV, the Explorer, has got here. It ended up being cheaper to fly Captain Hamilton to Anchorage, who drove it to Haines and got it on the ferry and took it down here, than it was to pay the normal transport route, which, interestingly enough, meant it would have had to go all the way from Anchorage to Seattle and then back to Petersburg for whatever reason. So thanks to Captain Hamilton, and it's here and in service, and we're checking out things and fixing some things that we want changed. But looks so far so good. CCON has recently talked to Carl in the group about their spring startup on the ADOT project. Due to the weather, they plan to mobilize back to Petersburg on March 21st and restart construction on the 28th of March. Looks like the first part of the project will be some concrete pavement between Haugen Drive and the bridge, and they should be starting their public information campaign well in advance of the work, so the community should know what they're doing. But so they should be here very shortly. We had a Firefighter 1 course was scheduled to start on February 13th. We did not get any new volunteers, and we have a Emergency Trauma Technician, or ETT, course scheduled to begin on February 28th. Hopefully we had some folks that want to show up. We continue to see a shortage of volunteers in both fire and EMT areas. May result in having to kind of reevaluate our service delivery options for those two areas. We're getting critically low in volunteers in both of those areas. So working with Sandy to try to figure out some solutions. Ducky Dive, youth girls basketball, and the fitness classes continue to become the focus in programming and Parks and Rec. Donnie and his staff are right now working on the Alaska Parks and Recreation Conference, which is going to be held here in Petersburg in September, right after Southeast Conference. So we will have a busy September for lots of folks. The new tax map books for the Borough Assessor have been completed. This is a part of the borough formation, as well as getting our maps online. We renumbered every parcel and created a map system so we can keep track of things and then actually put them in books with the actual maps. So getting there. They're available at this point in hard copy, and I'm not sure if they're available electronic yet, but that's the goal someday, isn't it, Liz? I thought so. Thanks to Liz, she's been working on grants for the Children's Center expansion project. They are still in need of some donations and things since they found out that we have to sprinkle the whole building. So anything you can do would be helpful. Congratulations to Mindy Anderson. I think you've seen it in our other media outlets, but just wanted to also thank her. She was the winner of our Path to Prosperity Business Plan contest. Her business, Salty Pantry Market and Deli, won a $40,000 in technical assistance to help launch her business. So if you see Mindy, number one, go to her store, and number two, tell her congratulations on everything she's accomplished. Throughout March, the library will be hosting a community art project. Teens and adults are invited to join Doris Olson in making a permanent art installation for the library's teen room. This project is a STEAM, science, technology, education, art, and math initiative, and is made possible with grants from the Petersburg Community Foundation and the Institute for Museum and Library Services. Our long-awaited library landscaping looks like it will begin. It's tentatively scheduled to begin in April, with hardscaping and rock work in April, and then planting in May. And this is in the areas out in front of the library. So hopefully that will happen as scheduled. We had property assessments will be going out the end of this month. Property owners will have 1 month to appeal their assessment, and appeal forms can be found on the borough's website or here in the borough offices. Harbor staff assisted the U.S. Coast Guard with their annual dockside exams last week. Over 50 exams were performed this trip. They'll return in May to give another round of exams. Just want to thank to Glow, her staff, the Coast Guard, and everybody involved with that to help folks out in getting these exams done. With the weather, the staff in the harbor is trying to get a jump on some of the spring maintenance items. New sacrificial faceboards in the North Harbor will install 13-yard dumpsters that have all been serviced and are back in operation. Algae treatment is getting applied on dry days to aid in the fight against green slime. And the large crane is back in service after a coupler let go last week during loading of crab gear. Harbor appreciates Jason Lure and Piston and Rudder Services, who helped with the quick fix to get that back up and running. And we shall see, but we have, upon the completion of the Middle Harbor repair project, the certificates of completion and the final invoices were sent to Uncruise Adventures for payment. Contact was made with the company's CFO, who reported he would work towards securing payment. I'm not sure we've got a commitment to pay what we sent them as far as a bill, but at least they're committing to pay. So anyway, that's it, unless there's questions.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions of the manager on his report?
Yes. So this is kind of a Carl, but so say if the bids don't come out as well as we'd like for the baler conveyor structure, how much longer is the service life for that? Is there any fear of are we going to have to accept a proposal for a bid when we don't really want to because of the timeline that we're working with, or?
No, not necessarily. We tried to get a jump on this bid before it was failing. The structure was failing. There's a lot of scale and degradation of the supports, so its time is getting short, but it's not going to fail tomorrow. So if we have an issue with bids that are too high, we should be able to regroup. We'll still be okay.
Great.
Any other questions of the manager's report? I guess this is a Carl question, or maybe Steve could answer it too. When is Seacon expecting to be done with the paving of South Nordic? I mean, they're starting in the end of next month. They have sidewalks to do yet?
They have a lot of work to do yet, and I can't answer that question for them. They will hopefully be done with all of the paving by right around the first week, second week of July. But
I know it's all weather dependent, but I was just wondering what their time frame was. Just curious about the conflict with the salmon season and the hauling freight and all that stuff. So
right, they've been through that drill a couple times with the downtown project and last summer, of course. So it still is part of their contract to allow for container trucking to make it through the project site. So it'll be roughly the same, at least through half of the summer.
okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, unfinished business. We have an ordinance tonight under The only thing under unfinished business, it's ordinance 2016-01. It's an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adjusting the fiscal year 2016 budget for known changes. I'll entertain a motion to adopt that ordinance in its third and final reading.
So move. I'll second.
Been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Logadakis to adopt ordinance 2016-01 in its third reading. Discussion? Just for people listening, this is the third reading of the ordinance that is going to, transfer monies for potential funding of the municipal building, jail project, and paving roads and a few other items. So, no assembly discussion. Clerk, call the roll.
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Okay, that ordinance passes in its third and final reading, 6-0. So, next item on the agenda, new business. First item there is ordinance 2016-02, and this is an ordinance adopting the comprehensive plan dated February 22nd, 2016 for the Petersburg Borough. I'd entertain a motion to pass this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, then moved by Member Gregor, seconded by Member Logadakis to adopt ordinance 2016-02. Discussion. And Jay?
Simply put, I think Dave Kinsinger phrased it really well. It is, do I think it's a perfect document? No. I think it's a good blend of a lot of opinions, which means I think most of us have something we're not overly thrilled with, but it's nothing set in stone. It is an outline, and I thank the Planning Commission for the effort they put in, and we'll definitely be voting yes on this.
Any other discussion? Bob?
Just a question on the amendments. There's, one of the amendments is to have, and I don't find it here real quick in front of me, but put the board back together from the economic development to look at the fisheries every 5 years, I believe it was. What was the rationale behind that?
Sure. Whoever's the most appropriate one to answer it, I imagine that'd be Liz.
That came from the Economic Development Council, and the rationale was that that committee met a few years ago, made a bunch of recommendations, and we thought it would be valuable because it is a blend of commercial fishermen, processors, and other industry types to sort of check in with them periodically and see, how are things going in Petersburg? Are the things that we could do to improve attracting more fishermen here, keeping fishermen here, attracting processors here, keeping processors here? Mostly it's just a check-in and to see what their priorities are, what things we can do to help. That's the rationale.
Was there a reason you didn't go broader? In other words, we have an economy that needs to be broadened out, and we need to be looking at other things. Is there a reason we didn't look across the board at all economic opportunities?
That discussion that I remember, it didn't come up. So there wasn't a reason why we didn't discuss it or didn't broaden it. Like, that wasn't purposeful. But that was just the focus, was the commercial fishing one. We have for PDC, we have other small groups as well. We have a small mill group that gets together now and again. So we also have that one already percolating. And as far as other ones, those are kind of the two that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Is that up, Bob? Any other discussion on the ordinance adopting the comprehensive plan? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Nancy,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2016-02 passes in its first reading. The next reading on these ordinances that we've just moved forward the second reading, will be the second of the first meeting in March 7th, and that'll also have the public hearing on it. So, time for public comment. More public comment. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2016-05, and this is a resolution of the Petersburg Borough establishing the Borough Assembly as the local marijuana regulatory authority. I'll entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 2016-05.
So move.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Castro to adopt Resolution 2016-05. Discussion? When's the deadline on this? This is just, we're just going to temporarily taking this role? Maybe it'll be form a committee if needs be, or?
I can kind of speak to this. You probably won't have to do anything. This is basically set up that if somebody applies to the state and does not get an answer in a timely fashion, they then can apply to the local, whoever this committee is, and to say, hey, will you grant my permit? It's liable not to happen. There's also some talk that you have to have this set up if the borough wants to at some point share in revenue, if in fact the state decides to share revenue. So that, there's a lot of big ifs, but there has to be a local regulatory body set up if in fact the state decides to share revenue on this. So we didn't know who else to put, especially at first, other than maybe assume if the assembly wants to do this. If you don't, we can find another board, but it seemed to make sense to make the assembly do it.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Doesn't seem like it'll be a very busy endeavor. So any other discussion on Resolution 2016-05?
Well, Steve, like you said on this right here too, it's written very explicitly in the resolution that there's any opportunity to be able to change a different board or committee to act as this in the future. If we just give it a resolution.
Yeah. We tried to do this in a resolution form, so it made it easy on the assembly to, if you guys later decide, oh my God, you're getting buried, you can assign this to another committee or another group. So, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on this resolution? Okay, seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Okay, Resolution 2016-05 passes unanimously. Next item is Resolution 2016-06, a resolution of the Petersburg Borough supporting the appropriate treatment of Alaska's sport and commercial salmon industries through fair allocation of Pacific salmon stocks in the Pacific Salmon Treaty. I'll entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 2016-06.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Gregor, seconded by Member Lynn to adopt Resolution 2016-06. Discussion? This resolution was sent to us by, Deborah Lyons, I believe, from Sitka, and the board. And Mitch Eide called me today, and he's asked for support in this. It's just to make sure that we have fair negotiations during the next treaty negotiations with Canada, basically. So, any other discussion?
I noticed in the resolution that it didn't mention anything about, say, Canada's upstream, actions that may cause issue with us down here in Southeast. And is there any reason that we didn't insert anything with their mining practices and everything within the resolution, or?
I don't know if that would be something we would want to do or not. And just another little conversation I had in Juneau on that. I know this week, Lieutenant Governor Malott, I think the governor's going to be back there too, but Malott's going to try to get a meeting with someone in the Secretary of State, and I don't think it'll be Kerry, but to talk about this issue, the Transboundary River issue. So I think it's getting traction. I think that meeting we had in Juneau was on Thursday was good.
Excellent.
Talking with Senator Murkowski's staff. So I don't know if we can, if we'd like to amend this to put it in there. So more discussion on it?
Just a little. I think that the intent of the resolution was just to deal with the allocation question and not with the condition of the transboundary rivers. Okay. And
Probably
so
a
it may
good
be
point.
easier to address them as two separate things.
Gotcha.
Probably a good point. So Heather Hardcastle is going to keep us in the loop like she has been on any change, any information about the transboundary river issues. And if I get information addressed to me, I'll forward it on to the Assembly. So is there any more discussion on Resolution 2016-06? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Okay, Resolution 2016-06 passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is setting the budget calendar for reviewing the budget that has just been presented to us for the fiscal year 2017. I'll entertain a motion to approve the budget calendar as presented.
So move.
Second.
Second, motion's been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to adopt the budget calendar presented to us by the Finance Department for the fiscal year 2017 budget calendar. Just for people listening in the audience, first reading of the budget ordinance will be March 21st, but prior to that, March 1st, there'll be a budget review and motor pool presentation, and that special session is at 10 a.m. I would imagine all of this will be posted in the regular posting places around the community or within the borough and as well on the website. So, discussion? Just, I guess I could bring it up at this time. I will be probably gone for the first reading of this ordinance, but it's more than likely I will be back by the second reading, April 4th. I'll be herring fishing, so hopefully we're only gone for 2 weeks again this year. That was short and sweet last year. So,
I suppose if we're talking about scheduling, I will add that I have absolutely no clue which of those meetings I'll be a part of, as we'll be expecting a child somewhere in that window, so be a part of what I can. Do my best.
Nancy.
I have on my day planner bid open. Is this going to conflict? Do I have the right date?
If I may.
Yes, Steve.
The bid opening is probably talking about the potential for this building, and that's been moved at this point a week out. I think we've been, thank you, the 8th. And I'll keep you all informed. That's liable to be moved to the end of that week as a special meeting if because the contractor asked for a extension. So I think you're off the hook.
Well, I have a class all that week until noon on Friday. Any possibility that we can have the bid opening afternoon?
That is entirely up to the assembly.
We don't necessarily have to be part of the bid opening, correct? But we might have to have a special meeting if it gets pushed back any further to award the bid?
The actual bid, I'm sorry, the bid openings will be done in Juneau at the architect's office. We'll be on a conference call here. The assembly doesn't need to be in on that. The bid award, obviously you do,
right.
And that's been moved to, I think, the end of that week.
Okay.
I believe Steve.
Yeah.
Looks like someone in the back wants to have a something to say. What's Jody think?
Yeah.
The bid opening for this building is in Juneau. For the building
Correct.
remodel.
Then the bid award is in, didn't I just say that in Juneau? Mike's nodding his head. So I must have
we
said
didn't
something
hear that,
right.
sorry.
Okay. Yeah, the bid award is in Juneau. The bid opening is in Juneau at the architect's office. We will be in on a conference call. The assembly does not need to attend that. The bid award, we are moving to, was the 10th or the 11th?
I think it's
Is that an 8-day window? So we have to wait after the bid opening, so we have 8 days after the bid's open?
7 days we're required. I do it by 8 to make sure no one can complain.
So, and that'll be well advertised, and it could be a short meeting, it might be a long meeting, depends on the bid amounts and the public input level.
So for the meeting, the special session on March 1st, I was just going to give a general overview of the budget and point out any changes, significant changes, and then Carl was going to go ahead and do his motor pool presentation. But if there's anything else that you want to talk about with any other groups, I didn't know if, in prior years you've met with community services and other groups. Now would be the time, because I'll need to schedule that with them and let them know when they need to be available.
So if there's any assembly members that would like to add discussion with a different department or anybody else that we budget money to, now might be the time to let Jody know, I guess, as you're saying, so we can schedule that
That would be great.
without any rush. Seeing none, clerk call the roll.
Eric,
Yes.
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, we will stick with the dates as close as we can, presented by the Finance Department for the budget calendar discussion. Okay, where are we? Planning Commission comments regarding proposed amendments to the Tongass Land Resource Management Plan. I'd entertain a motion to send a letter, I think is what they're requesting, with their proposed amendments to the Tongass Land and Resource Management Plan.
I so moved.
Okay, is there a second? Motion been made by Member Lagadakis, seconded by Member Castro to go along with the request from the Planning Commission. So, discussion. Bob?
I've read that, part of that amendment, and I frankly think that the whole thing needs to start over, but that's another issue. You can't run a program on the Tongass on second growth. You cannot be done, in my opinion. But I want to talk specifically to some of the points that were made in this letter. I want to talk about one about export. Export is the folks that are running the Tongass here and who are in the business has very limited options under 36 CFR to what can or cannot be exported. And I mean, they are extremely limited. And they have no choice to follow it. To make comments that, well, we shouldn't or should, I think is inappropriate there. That's in statute. And so I can't, that part I would have a problem with. Another part I have a problem with is talking about a sustained yield on like an island basis, like saying that we need to support the industry here and not worry about anybody else and so forth. I can't go along with that. I think you need to look at the sustained yield from a much longer basis, and the National Forest Management Act establishes that. And I do have concerns about maintaining some local industry and so forth, but putting constraints like this on a land manager out there who has to also deal with not only the second growth and everything else that's come about it, but also natural events like hurricanes or wind throw or so forth, makes it almost impossible with what's being asked here. So I really cannot support this letter from my perspective. I agree with making some changes, but this, I can't be there because I think it constrains the land manager way too much.
What is the time frame for, that I'm assuming we have a comment period to reply to their plan? What is the deadline for that? Does anybody know? I don't.
It's midnight tonight.
Oh, midnight tonight. Oh, okay. Thanks, Dave. Any other comments on the request by the Planning Commission? Cindy?
I made my own comments to the plan, and Bob and I have talked a little bit about this. I have some problems with how the Tongass is trying to deal with shifting to younger growth timber, and that they're proposing cutting trees before culmination of mean annual increment, which is required by the National Forest Management Act, and they're trying to do it through a legislative workaround, an administrative workaround rather, to a legislative problem. So I think that's their first problem. And the second problem is that they mischaracterize young growth. They're counting trees as up to 150 years old as young growth, but USDA Pacific Northwest for Alaska forests considers young growth as up to 80 years. So they need to be consistent with their own science. There are some other issues. I would rather see us go ahead and sign off on the letter because I think it's important to get comments in. I think the flaws don't outweigh the positive of making a comment and showing that the borough has had some input to the forest management process. I've seen some other entities' comments, and there are the young growth transition and some of the other characterization of young growth age and some other concerns. Some of the renewable resources things seem to be common themes in everybody's responses. So I think we're not going to be too far off base with this letter. If we were to go forward and put this letter, I'd be in favor of doing that.
The part I cannot support is trying to do like a sustained yield on a smaller island basis. It just cannot work. That's the part I'm not in favor of.
So we'll take any other comments on this, and then if you would like to amend their proposed letter, Bob, take one thing out of it or two things out of it, we could go that route too. Any other discussion or comments by the Assembly? Or we could vote on it just like it is.
Give me a chance to take a look if you want to move on to a...
Well, why don't we just take a 5-minute break?
Okay.
Does that work? Okay, we will reconvene at shortly after 7 o'clock.
Which letter is
Meeting back to order. It's like 3 minutes after 7. We're discussing supporting a letter that's been recommended to us by the Planning Commission to make some proposed changes, amendments to the Tongass Land and Resource Management Plan. So we're still in that discussion. And do either Assembly Member Lynn or Logadakis have a question for Mr. Kinsinger, who was on the Planning Commission? Are we good? I don't know that we have any questions now, Dave, but
I have a proposed amendment to the letter.
Okay, all right. So,
Okay, what I would move that we change this would be on paragraph 3 on the second page. It starts with "There are no high production mills in Petersburg." Go to the very last sentence where it says the proposed plan amendments do not provide supply in the sector for this sector. I would drop everything after amendment and modify that to say needs to encourage local small-scale industry.
so the last sentence is the only thing that you would change?
I would change that, yes.
And how would that be worded? The proposed plan amends?
The proposed plan amendment needs to encourage local small-scale industry.
Okay, do you have that,
I do.
Mindy? Did everybody see what changes he's asking for? So we need a second to that amendment.
Second.
Okay, the amendment's been moved and seconded by Member Gregor. The motion was made by Member Lynn, just for clarification. Discussion on the amendment? Okay, clerk call the roll on the amendment.
Bob,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes. Okay, the amendment to the third paragraph on the second page has been changed, or has been voted for unanimously. So now we will, any other discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, will the clerk call the roll on the motion to support the letter as amended?
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Okay, we have unanimous support from the Assembly with a little modification to the proposed amendments to the Tongass Land and Resource Management Plan. So that moves forward. Next item on the agenda is Papke's Landing, Kupanoff, and Entrance Island dock facilities. And I will, since you have to make a motion in the positive, I will entertain a motion to accept, not that we're accepting the offer, but make a motion to accept the offer from the state for the 3 facilities, the one at Entrance Island at Hobart Bay, the dock at Kupanoff, and the Papke's Landing dock at roughly 10 mile out the road. So I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been, did you kind of get the gist of that motion, Mindy? Okay. It's been, motion's been made by Member Lynn and seconded by Member Logadakis, and just for the sake of discussion, when we were in Juneau, Councilman Beebe from Kupanoff was in the room, and our lobbyist Ray Matuszewski, Assembly Member Lynn, and Logadakis and myself, and Mike Lukshin from the state DOT, and they gave us an offer of $738,000 and change to take over these 3 facilities. And in one of his letters, he said there was an offer that was more than the first offer, which was a couple weeks prior to that down in the manager's office of $258,000. But during our comprehensive plan, when we had the engineer assess the conditions of just the 2 facilities, the one at Papke's and the one at Kupanoff, the total bill to fix those 2 facilities was $2.5 million, and they're offering us $730,000 to take them over. Another thing that was kind of a question that has arisen was you get the harbors, or the floating, the infrastructure, but you don't get the land. The land belongs to DNR. So one question in my mind is that transferable? And if it is, if there's a core permit that goes along with that, is that transferable? So we've got a lot to discuss. So that's my 2 cents. Normally I wait and speak last, but I just couldn't stand it. Anyway.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
point of clarification, the line you're referring to is the tide lines with them each?
I believe,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
So any other discussion on this? Nancy?
Once again, I think we shouldn't even be discussing this until they're in a service area. But I want to know, in addition now, where the funding for operation and maintenance might possibly come from. I don't think, I'm going to be voting no.
That's a good point, and I think, I don't know how to go about this. I wanted it on the agenda as an action item under new business so we could, discuss it, make a motion, discuss it formally, and then right now I'm not in favor of this either. And part of the discussion with Mr. Lukshin from the state was if we don't accept this offer and it just, you keep them, what happens? He said, well, if they get in too much disrepair, we'll take them out. So do we want to take them, and if they get in disrepair, be the bad guys, or do we want the state to be the bad guys? I think that, it's two of these facilities, would it'd be very important to keep them in place, but how do we afford to do it? And I'm referring to the Papke's facility and the Coopernoff facility. That's my opinion. So how do we come up with a plan where we could take these and fund them? I guess we could tell them we don't accept your offer at this time, or give them some reasoning why. Nancy?
I think if we wait, leave them with the state, maybe they'll fix them. If enough people called to tell them how necessary they think they are, perhaps they'll fix them. Otherwise, if we could tear them out for $728,000, maybe we should.
Yeah. So, Cindy?
I'm just looking back over my notes because there was a lot that we covered, and
That was a long
we were a
meeting.
little taken aback by the dollar amount. Mike Lukshin went into some detail talking about Tier 1 and Tier 2 project funding as a way to take on some of the maintenance issues, but there's no guarantee that there would be money in those programs, so that makes me a little bit concerned. And they did raise the question of the core permits specifically for Papke's, and what I have written is they would transfer the permits if they can. There's issues with the Corps of Engineer database, and I had forgotten that even though I wrote it down, and that we would need the Tidelands permit, and that the land the pier is on might not transfer with the facility. So I almost think the state needs to sort some of this out, and maybe it would be best to table this discussion, not say no, but leave it out there until they can get us more definitive information.
Bob?
If we were to accept those, I have some of the same concerns you do about Entrance Island, is the liabilities to the borough. And would probably, what you would have to do, would probably take the major part of that money, if you contracted it, to be able to destroy that facility there, even though it's just a dock there in the water. Having some past experience with the Tidelands permits and the Corps of Engineers permits with Papke's Landing, is that there's a lot of questions in my mind. The Tidelands permits do not transfer directly. We would have to apply for those. Right now, I don't know what's in the Tidelands permit, as neither does anybody else here. And also the Corps permit. Sometimes the Corps permit is not transferable and you start over from scratch. And we don't know any of that. Cindy makes a good point that maybe what we should do is to go back and say we would like, with a list of questions. I'm thinking out loud now, with a list of questions, and what we have, the questions we have to ask to them before we're willing to take that over, i.e. what the Tidelands permit, or the Tidelands permits are with copies, whether they'll transfer, whether they won't, and let them do the homework with DNR and with maybe with the Corps. It might be worth and then also encouragement at the same time to provide an offer without Entrance Island, where they take care of it themselves. I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah.
But when we were there, they were pretty adamant that it was all or nothing deal, is the way I walked away with. And I thought Mark...
That has been his position on it, but now we're in the negotiating stage, so it's our time to make an offer back, and I agree with Cindy's idea of possibly tabling this until we could get more information about the transfer of the Tidelands and what are the stipulations or conditions of the Corps permits, if there are any. And I think we need to know the whole picture. And then we ask them for $3 million, and then they know where we stand.
Yeah.
Or whatever. That's just, trying to add some humor to this, because it isn't very funny, because it's the condition of the state. Nancy?
I think where we stand is it's not enough money.
At this point, it isn't.
And so I think we should just say no and see if they come back with another offer. And people who want to maintain the float need to contact the state for maintenance, since the state is regulating it now, owns it now.
Yeah. That's another post, Jay.
My 2 cents, for whatever it's worth, is all money aside or service areas aside, we're not even looking at this with a complete picture of information. So I would move to table this.
Until we get more information on
Until such time when we have information that allows us to make a more educated decision. That's an okay way to phrase it?
I would think so, yeah.
Cool.
Okay, second?
Seconded.
Okay. Clerk, call the roll.
Eric,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes, okay, the discussion on the transfer of the 3 facilities from the state to the borough has been tabled till we can get more information, and I'm sure Steve is just looking forward to digging into that for us. And we'll, if we get some questions that we want to ask, I believe we're going to be meeting with DNR over Southeast Conference. Liz and I are going to go talk to them about land transfer issues, so we could bring it up to them at the same time, maybe. So give them a little heads up ahead of time and see what they can do. Okay, anybody have any communications? One thing, I got an email today from the secretary at SEPA, and they've actually taken a, given their opinion on the Tongass Land and Resources Management Plan, and I forwarded that. I believe I did. I thought I hit the right button to the assembly members, but it doesn't give us much time, only up till midnight. So that's their position on it, and then we've taken ours. So assembly discussion items, recognitions. Does anybody have any recognitions tonight? Cindy.
I've got one, and the Arts Council finally got Eric Larson's statue installed in the park, thanks to the borough for their help on that. And I've heard several names mentioned as being a part of that, but initially there was a committee of citizens who helped with the design selection, and those folks included Brian Paust, Bill Tremblay, Dave Reamer, Peter Schultz, Polly Lee, Patty Norheim, and Michelle Funt was the president of the Arts Council during that time. So I just wanted to make sure that folks knew all of those people had been involved, and I really want to give Eric a nod for all of the dogging of this. It's been a really complicated process, and it's good to see that finally in place.
Yeah, I looked at it today. It looks nice. Nice addition. Any other recognitions? I'd like to recognize the people, and I don't know all the names, that have been helping on the Children's Center. People that have given donations, and I know Assemblymember Len has been busy with his expertise helping on that, so that's great to see that moving forward. Next discussion item on the agenda is the marijuana ordinance, and we have a list of questions for the Assembly that the administration has put forward. I guess, Steve, did you come?
If I may.
Yeah.
In your packets is a entirely different ordinance than what you saw last time. After going through our attorney's recommendations and looking through it, we needed to find a way to simplify things. I actually took our current alcohol ordinance, used that as a base, and made some minor changes to it to add the marijuana thing to it, and it worked much, much better for the attorney, and we ended up with something that's a lot closer to being, meets the needs of the borough. So that's what's in your packet, is a totally brand new thing you've never seen before, with some changes done by us internally as well as the attorney to bring it up to speed. What you have also is a list of 6 questions that we have that we kind of need some guidance on to fill in the blanks on this ordinance before we finalize it enough to bring it back to the Assembly for actually officially a vote. So I'd like to go through those questions if no one has an objection, and I'll explain them as we go. The first one is, should the borough have a separate local license for marijuana facilities? What this is about, basically, the state is doing licensing now. Do you want the borough to get into the licensing business? I'll be honest with you, I recommend that you don't. It's just an extra level of administration and hassle. We don't currently license businesses. We have a sales tax registration. This would actually create a whole other set of bureaucracy where we'd have to. The advantage is you might collect some revenue off of it, but I don't think it's significant. But anyway, I mean that's one of the questions: is does the Assembly want the borough to have a separate marijuana license for each of the 4 types of facilities that we would have to manage and collect money on and so forth? So.
This is just under discussion items. Should we go through these like we are and maybe present them to the Assembly again at the next meeting where we can take action on them, and then we'll have more input from Eric and Jay and the chief on their, what their take is from the visit in Wrangell.
Sounds really good.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, but we could definitely just.
If I answer questions, if anybody has, if I'm not making any sense of any of these.
Can I add something to your number one right there? Both in Washington and Colorado, and I think we'll find in Alaska also, the local separate license has been deemed cost prohibitive because both Washington and Colorado have been very intelligent, as like Alaska, and have their hands open to get much money for state permits, and they found it more cost prohibitive for encouraging business to this point.
Okay.
If that's a fair way to put it.
Yes, sir.
Under the regulations, the state regulations, any application then under one set of the regulations, any application had to come back to the borough for approval. Is that still there?
That is still there.
Okay.
Yeah, the state has overarching. They do the research. They make sure the person's qualified, doesn't have the wrong kind of a prison record or whatever, and then there must be a kind of an acceptance at the borough level of that license before it's finally.
And do the regs still read that if the borough says no, that they will deny the permit? Is that read that way?
I'm not sure. Jay, do you know?
I'm not positive, but I believe it's in what we set up tonight. The local control board has that option to do that. That's why we're there in theory with that. We can put the kibosh on something that does not meet for our local needs. It's kind of the local out portion of that.
Thank you.
As last I read it.
Add it to the list of trying to make sure.
I'll research it again too, but as far as I understand, Bob.
Cindy?
Would it be possible to put this list of questions, and I realize this could open up a can of worms, on the borough's website so that folks could weigh in if they wanted to and see what questions are?
I humbly think that's a great idea. I've been more feedback the merrier.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Okay, number 2 was, should the borough allow a marijuana facility on borough-owned property? I'm not talking about who runs it. I'm just saying, borough has Tidelands lease. Somebody wants to, or borough owns a piece of property and somebody wants to lease it, or, do you want to allow a marijuana facility on borough property? Don't have to answer it now, but that's
land.
Leased land. Yeah, we would assume anything else would be something we would sell, but so that's a, by the way, that also would include if you said yes to that and the borough got into the business, then it would be legal. If you said no to this, the borough really couldn't get into the marijuana business in any way, shape, or form. That's one way to look at it, too. Should the borough allow on-site use of marijuana at a retail location? That is something that is clearly a local decision. The state statute allows it, as long as locally you say thumbs up and allow that. So it's something the Assembly will have to weigh in on and say, yes, we're going to allow on-site use at a retail location or not. Should the borough limit the hours of operation for retail marijuana store? State regulations state that the retail business must be closed from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. each day. That's it. We have a much more elaborate schedule for our bars. That's one way to do it, is tie it to our current bar schedule. But the Assembly will need to set that and decide what they want to do with the hours of operation. should the borough set a maximum number of permits within the community? And again, there's 4 types of facilities. So you're talking about setting a maximum by type. Types are cultivation, manufacturing, testing, and retail. So do you want to say only one retail or only one, whether the borough wants to get into that or not, limiting those numbers or not? Yes, sir.
What was the experience in Colorado and Washington State on that? Did they leave
They've
it
done
open?
some different things, and I'm going to mix the two of them up probably because one did one thing, one did the other. In one state, they said no one, and this is kind of a slightly different than this question, but in one state they said you can't grow it and sell it. They have to be separate people. In the other state, they said that's okay. So in both states, as a general rule, they are not limiting the number of permits. At a local level, communities are allowed to do that. So it comes down to the question is, do you want to let free enterprise just kind of run and allow the state to sell as many permits as they want? Or does the Borough Assembly want to say, we're only going to allow one retail permit or one, manufacturing permit or something like that? So, and then the last one kind of is, should the borough restrict any one of the 4 types of locations associated, which is cultivation, manufacturing, testing, and retail? You can actually ban, the state statute allows the borough to say, we're not going to allow any manufacturing. Or we're going to allow retail, but not cultivation. By the way, that would make your retail not work. But so the assembly has the right to decide that. You can ban any one of the 4 different types. There are ramifications, obviously. If you can't test it, then it makes it pretty hard to have any of the others. So that's pretty much it. I mean, again, it's fairly simplistic. We tried to approach the ordinance as letting the state file the burden of proof here. In other words, they do all the hard work. The borough can collect sales tax on the sales if a retail operation opens up. We cannot add an excise tax without going back in front of the voters. At least that's what our attorney says at this point. So we would have, like we did with the cigarette thing, we'd have to go back to the voters to say we'd like to pass a fill in the blank additional excise tax. So at this point, borough revenue, if something was to open up, would be purely sales tax, and then any revenue sharing that the state may choose to share down the road. But that it's a fairly simplistic ordinance. I encourage you to look at it, make sure we didn't. Again, we're trying to allow the state statute to drive everything. It makes it easier on law enforcement. They don't have to kind of figure out, what state versus local, and most of the state stuff is, it's set up as basically citations. So Kelly's folks, if it came down to it, could file a citation for someone under the state statute, and, away we go. So
my personal opinion is, looking at the way you mirrored the marijuana, or connected the marijuana ordinance to the liquor ordinance with a few changes in words and stuff, it looked like it would work for me anyway.
Simple.
I would concur with it, that it pretty much mirrors alcohol, and I think that idea works pretty well.
Simpler the better.
It was a lot simpler than what we tried the first time around. I mean, we used 2 different other communities as a model, and and it just was a mess. And this works better. But those are the questions that, for the moment, and if you come up with any others, we'll get it on the website. If anybody else comes up, get them to us. But within the context of that ordinance, these are things that the Borough Assembly can choose to, further restrict or specify. And, for example, on the number of permits, if the Borough Assembly doesn't specify anything, then there's no maximum. It's just whatever the state board approves. Again, the simpler the better from the standpoint. If you want to specify, then we'll have to write that into the ordinance. Okay.
So maybe it doesn't even have to be at the next meeting if we need to answer those questions. And when we start going through the ordinance process, we could answer the questions and And then I think it'd be interesting to get the feedback from the meeting in Wrangell. in
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
First part of March.
March 1st.
Yeah, I guess it is the first part, yeah. Should be okay.
And as I think somebody mentioned, I mean, today, somebody could apply for a permit in Petersburg. They'd go through the state, and it'll, you know, they meet all the right qualifications. That can be granted. Nothing the Assembly has done or not done here will affect that, other than there's a bit of a grandfathering thing. You know, if the Assembly decides that, no, we're only going to allow one permit, and the state issues 2 permits, you're not going to have authority to stop that probably, because we didn't have an ordinance in place at the time that the state passes it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
It seems like the number of retail permits is going to be kind of self-regulating. If it can't make any money at it, it'll just going to...
the biggest restriction is actually not going to be in the state permits. It's going to be in the testing.
Right. Yeah,
The way the state drew the ordinance, the statute up, you need a scientific director for the testing facility who basically must have served time in a lab and be a degreed professional.
PhD with 2 years experience, master's and 4 years experience, or a bachelor's and 6 years experience.
And the experience is in a lab. So my guess is you're not going to have very many folks who qualify for that. If you don't have a testing facility, none of the rest of this can open, unless there's a portable unit or something like that.
And Mr. Mayor, that was actually an interesting conversation that came up with the Wrangell representatives
Right.
at Municipal League, was to put a testing facility on, have a floating testing facility and have that move between communities, and that would get past the problem of us being on an island.
Correct.
Which I had not.
And
before.
somebody may think of that, but currently, if somebody wanted to open up even if you had licensed growers, cultivators here, and licensed retailers, they cannot legally sell without it being officially tested in that testing facility. There's some pretty strict rules about it. That's going to be a big hurdle for most folks. So.
Nancy, you had a comment?
Well, I think the state has regulated it enough. And if we were to add a fee, the black market would continue pretty much like it is. And everybody who applies for a permit should be allowed, because the state has pretty much put the kibosh on it. If one thing doesn't work, something else will.
Bob, did you have a comment?
No.
Any other discussion on the marijuana ordinance? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So